Hello everyone and welcome to the 5-minute German A2 course. In today's video, we will take a look at the dative personal pronouns. We already saw the nominative and accusative personal pronouns in German A1 and got a basic understanding about dative. Now we will take a look at the personal pronouns in dative, as these will be frequently used in A2 as we make longer and more complicated sentences. So let's not waste any time and let's get started. So we will start by first of all doing a quick recap of when to use the dative case, so that when we use the personal pronouns in dative, you understand the reasoning behind it. Then we will take a look at the personal pronouns in dative, what are the different forms, and then I will also give you some examples of how these personal pronouns are used in sentences. At the end, I will give you a PDF with a list of dative verbs, which will help you in identifying when to use the personal pronouns in the dative form. So are you guys ready? Then let's begin. So when do we use the dative? So we use the dative with indirect objects. What are indirect objects? Let's understand this with an example. So I have the sentence, Peter buys Thomas a table. Now in this sentence, Peter is the subject because he is the one who is doing the action of buying. Table is the object because it is being bought. And what about Thomas? So Thomas in this sentence is the indirect object because Thomas is the one who is benefiting from the action. He is the one who is getting the table. So any person which benefits from an action is the indirect object. And in German, the subject is called the nominative case, the object is the accusative case, and the indirect object is the dative case. If you want to have more information about the dative, then I have made a video on this topic where I explain this in more detail, so you can go and check it out. I will link it in the description below. So the second situation where we use the dative is with some specific verbs. Some examples of these verbs are gehören, which means to belong, danken, to thank, gefallen, which means to please, bringen, which means to bring, and so on. So with these verbs, we will use the dative form. Then the third situation where we use the dative is after specific prepositions, such as mit, which means with, zu, which means to, and so on. So there is a list of prepositions which require that you use the dative form after them. So we will see some of them in the examples later. Now I am going to give you some tips on how you can identify the dative in a sentence. So the first is what we already saw, that the person who benefits from the action is dative. The second tip is that only living beings can be dative. And the third tip is that if you have two objects in a sentence, then the person or the living being will be dative and the thing will be accusative. Now let's take a look at the personal pronouns in dative. So we already saw the personal pronouns in nominative and accusative cases in A1. So what will be the dative forms of these personal pronouns? So the dative for first person singular will be mir, which means me. For second person singular, it will be dir, which means you. For third person male, it will be ihm with an M at the end. For third person neutral, it will also be ihm. And for third person female, it will be ihr, which means her. For first person plural, it will be uns, which is the same as the accusative case. For second person plural, it will be euch, which is also the same as accusative. For third person plural, it will be ihnen, and the formal way will also be ihnen. Only the first letter, which is E in German, will be capital. So these are the different forms of personal pronouns in dative. Now let's see how we can use these different forms in sentences. So let's take an example with mir, which is the first person singular. So we have the sentence, he gives me a book. Now in this sentence, he is the nominative case because it is a subject, book is the accusative case as it is the object, and me is the indirect object or dative in this case because it is the one who is receiving the book or getting the benefit from the action. In German, we can write this sentence as gibt mir ein Buch. Gibt mir ein Buch. Now in this sentence, is the nominative, Buch is the accusative, and mir is the personal pronoun in dative. So we did not use ich or mich over here because this is the dative case. That's why we used mir. Now let's take an example with one of the dative verbs. So I will take the verb gehören, which means to belong. So a sentence will be Die Tasche gehört mir. The bag belongs to me. So you see over here again we have used mir, which is the dative personal pronoun for first person singular. So whenever you have gehören or a conjugation of gehören in a sentence, you will always use the personal pronoun in dative form. Now let's take an example with a dative preposition. We will take the preposition zu, which means to or at in some cases. So an example can be kommst du zu mir? Will you come to me or my place? Here again we have used mir because we have zu before it, which is a dative preposition. Now let's take some examples with dir, which is the second person singular dative form. We will take the verb geben, which means to give. So a sentence can be Ich gebe dir ein Buch. I give you a book. And we use dir because it is the indirect object in this case. And it is coming after the verb geben, which itself is a dative verb. Now let's take another example with the dative preposition, which is mit, which means with. So a sentence will be Ich fahre mit dir nach Berlin. I travel with you to Berlin. So we use the dative form over here because it comes after mit. So this is something that you should keep in mind, that any pronoun or noun which comes after mit will always be in dative because it is a dative preposition. Now let's take an example with the third person male, which is ihm. So we take the verb erklären, which means to explain. So a sentence can be Ich erkläre ihm die Aufgabe. I explain the task to him. Now let's take an example with mit, which is the dative preposition. So we can say, kannst du mit ihm sprechen? Can you talk with him? So again, as the pronoun comes after mit, so it will be in the dative form. And since the dative form for third person neutral is also ihm, so the same sentence can have the meaning, can you talk with him? So in this case, I say maybe a child, because child is das Kind in German and it is a neutral. So that's why we will use the same personal pronoun over here as well. Now for third person female, we can say Ich kaufe ihr den Tisch. I buy her the table. And over here, as ihr is the indirect object, so we use the dative form. Now let's take a look at the first person plural form, which is uns. So an example will be Die Kellnerin bringt uns das Essen. The waitress brings us the food. Over here again, as the pronoun uns is coming after the verb bringen and is the indirect object as well, so we use the dative form. An example with the second person plural will be Ich gehe mit euch ins Kino. I go with you all in the cinema. And I think you know why we have used euch, which is the dative form over here. It is because it is coming after mit. Now the same sentence with the third person plural will be Ich gehe mit ihnen ins Kino. And the meaning for this is I go with them in the cinema, as we are talking about the third person plural over here. Now let's take a look at some examples with the formal way. So we have the commonly used sentence, which is Wie geht es Ihnen? How are you? So over here we say ihnen because we use the dative form. If you want to use the informal way, then you can use Wie geht es dir? Another example can be Ich zeige Ihnen den Weg. I will show you the way. This is again when you want to talk formally to someone. So these were the different personal pronouns in dative. Now as promised at the start, I have prepared a PDF with verbs which require the dative form after them. You can download it from the description below. I have added examples in the PDF as well, so go through them and see how we use the dative after different verbs so that you understand this concept and don't have any problem with it. So I hope that this video was helpful for you. As always, if you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for your time and your continuous support, and we will see each other in the next video.